Is there a point where we know enough about ourselves and our problems and just need to take some action, whether we feel ready or not? And at this point, is the ongoing quest for deeper insights and more knowledge just kind of slowing us down? This is what I'll be exploring today with my friend and incredible therapist, Natalie Rose. One of my favorite things about Natalie is that as a therapist, she's extremely grounded and practical in the way she helps people navigate eating disorders and eating disorder recovery. We've spoken a couple of times about the importance of opposite action, which is the practice of being able to recognize when we need to take action opposite to what we might be thinking or feeling. And we also speak a lot about what we can learn through the process of navigating building healthy relationships. So as always, remember, if you'd like to reach out to either Natalie or myself, you can find our details in the episode description. My name is Marcus. This is Strong Not Starving, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. Of course, it's important for us to understand ourselves, like to understand why we feel what we feel and why we believe the things that we believe, so we can navigate difficult feelings and even question some of our beliefs at times that might be self-limiting or maybe self-sabotaging. But do you think it's possible for the pursuit of more insight, more understanding, more awareness to become something akin to procrastination?
That's a really interesting question. I think procrastination is a form of avoidance, right? Like we
Hmm.
avoid the feeling of failing something, like doing the thing we need to do and failing at it, or we avoid the feeling that it's going to be hard, or we think we have to get it right. So we're just like waiting for a time when we feel like energetic enough to put the energy into it. Like there's so many reasons why we might procrastinate, but it all comes down to avoidance. So I think when you're saying like, are we hyper focusing on changing something about ourselves before we can live our lives? Um, yeah, I think that it could be a form of avoidance, like avoiding the uncertainty that, maybe there's nothing you can do to control what's going to happen in your future. I think maybe sometimes when we focus on like fixing ourselves, we think, okay, if I get myself right, then I'll find the partner or then I'll be successful. Whereas like the reality is like, no matter how hard we work on ourselves, there's still some things in life that we can't control. And sometimes, like, the discomfort is trusting yourself, trusting that you're okay how you are now. And now you can take a break from the insights and the self work and you can just like live your life now,
Hmm.
be present. I think being present can be difficult if we haven't practiced trusting ourselves, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I really want to know your opinions on this, because it's hard to ask questions without them sounding like loaded questions, without sounding like I'm trying to get like a specific answer. So I want to preface what I'm saying about the quote healing journey and insight by saying the things that I know about myself that came from therapy, that came from digging into my past, have become exceptionally helpful in navigating and framing difficult feelings, difficult emotions, difficult thoughts that I experience now. For example, the environment of conditional love and conditional acceptance growing up that I experienced, knowing that, like knowing the kind of feelings and beliefs that can come from growing up in that environment allows me to spot it and frame it really effectively in the present if I notice myself maybe putting too much emphasis on looking a particular way or making a particular amount of money, or anything that undermines my self-worth. So essentially knowing that I was raised with that allows me to spot when I'm reinforcing conditional self-acceptance for myself and go, okay, I know this about myself. What do I need to do now? But at the same time, I feel like I'm noticing a whole bunch of people on what I can only describe as this perpetual healing journey when there's no real goal or outcome that we're looking for other than to seek this magical place where we're no longer feeling any difficult feelings and we can finally take some action. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. If the healing journey can become this big, long, drawn out thing that actually distracts us from maybe the action that we need to be taking.
Yeah, I think this is a really good question, and there's different places that my mind is going to. One is that we're always going to be doing the work,
Hmm.
right? Like that awareness that you built in therapy about, learning about those ties to conditional love, like feeling that love is conditional, how it shows up in your daily life. And when you spot it, you shift, that awareness helps you work through difficult moments, right? Like the difficult moments in our lives are never going to stop. So the work is always going to help. And I think you mentioned that on our last episode too, right? Like we're always, even in the healthiest of relationships, we're always going to be working through challenges. But I think, like, when you say, and I have noticed this as well, like, when it feels kind of like the idea of just being on this perpetual healing journey, I think we can also kind of shift one obsession to another. Like, whereas before we might not have had that awareness of ourselves. So we might have struggled with an obsession with like food or our body as a way of changing ourselves to feel secure. And then that could have shifted now to ourselves. Okay, now I'm digging deeper into like what are the roots of this? And I need to keep digging until I feel perfect or until I feel good enough. And maybe some of this can be perpetuated by messages like, like there's a myth that you have to love yourself before you can have a healthy relationship, or, you know, which is not true, actually. We heal in healthy relationships, right? Or we heal in relationships. And so I think it's important to also notice that pattern. Like, is this drive to healing myself or fixing myself coming from a place of perfection where I feel like I have to get myself right? Or is it distracting me from being present and showing up and just practicing what I've learned in these hard moments and teaching myself that I can get through hard moments?
What you said there about relationships and that myth around you need to love yourself first before you can be in a healthy relationship. I've definitely heard that one. Can you elaborate on that for us and your thoughts and your experiences, both personal and professional, if you like, around that?
Yeah. I mean, so let's talk from a professional standpoint. Attachment is usually where a lot of our struggles and insecurities in relationships come from. Like, for example, you mentioned feeling that love is conditional. That can result in an insecure attachment because if we get triggered by the idea that we have to be a certain way in order for us to be loved, it creates anxiety, where we're now feeling anxious and like sort of pulling at strings to feel like, wait, is this relationship safe? Like, are you going to go anywhere? And that attachment, any kind of attachment insecurity, um, which is normal. I can't remember the stats. I literally like wrote my thesis on attachment, the connection between attachment and narcissism in grad
Amazing.
school, but that feels like so long ago. So I can't remember the stats, but there's like certain stats of like how many people actually have secure attachment versus anxious or avoidant. And then there's also like a fourth one, disorganized. But
Mm.
basically, it's like insecure and secure. And the way that someone with an insecure attachment heals is through having a relationship with a secure partner who demonstrates that they're not going anywhere. They don't pull away when you get upset. They don't give you the silent treatment. They demonstrate that they are there and they don't experience those same fears. Like if you don't text for a while, like, they still know that you're there emotionally, so they don't get anxious or avoidant, right? So, like,
Mhm.
having that regulates you, and you learn through that relationship, "Oh, like, I can breathe now. It's okay," and you can develop a more secure attachment. So, professionally, you cannot just heal on your own from insecure attachment solo on your
Yeah.
own. Like, it has to happen in the context of another relationship. Personally, yeah, like we talked about on my episode, that history of like the bad boyfriends and the obsession and like okay, so there's a lot of insecure attachment in my history. And I was not perfect when I met my now husband. So it- I had to work, like, I thought I was healed before I met him because when
Mhm.
I was single, it's kind of like that idea when you're not experiencing any triggers, like you feel like you're healed, but then when
Yeah.
you get in like
I know. I thought
right?
I was nailing it when I was single before I met my now wife. I thought I'd had life figured out, but no, I just wasn't being exposed to the kind of triggers that would really mess with me.
Exactly, exactly. And that's normal. Like relationships hold up a mirror to you and they show you the parts that still need to be healed or like
Yeah,
and again I'm using healed as not like you said that there's not like this fixed ending where you're suddenly not going to ever feel insecure or anxious in a relationship anymore, but it's like instead of using the word healed, like things you want to focus on and work through and not just kind of like sweep under the rug because they're going to keep coming up.
yeah.
So yeah, that happened when I met my husband. The first while when you're kind of in that honeymoon phase, like everything feels amazing. You feel like your best self. You're totally secure. They make you want to be a better person. Like you're on that high. And then you have your first argument, where like the curtain is pulled back. Like you see something real. Like, not that it's not real, but you see something that it just shines a mirror on a tender spot that's still sore. And so I had to work through that. Like I went to therapy, he did his own therapy, like we're both just imperfect humans and that's what relationships do. So they bring out those things that need to be worked through. And then if you can work through them together as a couple, like independently and also interdependently, that's how you can create a more secure relationship and bond.
Do we need to find someone who is kind of nailing it in their secure attachment style? If it, because I'm avoidantly attached. My wife previously anxiously attached. So we're that I know those 2 meet up quite often. You'd probably be able to explain better than me why those 2 often attract each other, but then it can cause a lot of challenges. So what is involved in 2 people meeting up when both of them have insecure attachment styles? No one is modeling the secure attachment style, and it's a bit messier.
Yeah, you're right. These 2 definitely attract. And part of it is because whatever your attachment style is, that's what you learned growing up. So you kind of like associate the feelings that come up with love. So, if someone is a bit more avoidant, that's or anxious, that's probably what modeled, like, the type of relationship that you were exposed to growing up. So you kind of like you're naturally attracted to that kind of push and pull.
Mm.
But that's typically what happens. Like when an avoidant person gets triggered, they pull back. They're needing their independence to feel secure again. And then that triggers the anxious person, which causes them to reach out even more because when they feel you pulling back, that makes them really scared that you're going to abandon them. So it's like this push and pull. And the way that you can work through that as a couple is by getting to know each other's triggers and doing your best to give your partner the space that they need to feel safe. So, like, if you are anxious and you know that your partner is avoidant, you might have to be okay with them having some space for a period of time. And that period of time can be sort of mutually agreed upon or aware, like, "You know what? I just need a couple hours to process this, and then we'll come back and talk later." Like, that could really help the anxious person know that you do need some space, but you'll come back.
Yeah.
And then similarly with the anxious person, they have to take accountability and not be, like, reaching out and pushing for more contact, that they will also need to sort of contain that, and yet they'll also ask for their partner for potentially, like, some reassurance or, like I mentioned, that this sort of, like, meeting point where you will both meet back and work on this, but you each sort of need your respective time to self-regulate.
Mm. And I know there might be a few people listening to this who are like, I thought we were talking about relationship with food stuff. But I find relationship work to be like romantic relationship work to be such a helpful thing to talk about because it provides an amazing parallel to some of the relationship with food stuff. So when we're talking about being able to or feeling free to create a relationship before you're quote perfect and healed and whatever, this is so true of what happens in our relationship with food, in our relationship with body. It can be so easy to put things off, to delay, to procrastinate. I'm going to take a different action when I'm the right weight, or I'm going to address my challenges with binge eating when I feel confident enough to do so. Or, always when. But if we get into this, I can only do that when I'm healed type mindset, it just moves the goalposts and pushes those essential steps further and further down the road. So I guess I love the parallel of relationships because not taking action, not taking the difficult action with food, with body image, the things that need to happen because they feel hard, because we might not fully understand how they work. It's like saying, "No, no, no, no. I'm going to stay single and totally isolated and not have any friends and not form any significant relationships, no friendships, no romantic relationships, no anything until I've completely figured myself out," which is it's never going to happen without the relationships to provide the crucible for that to actually happen.
Yeah, I agree. And also, knowing how this pattern of attachment insecurity affects your relationship with food and with your body. So, for example, in my history, when I was feeling anxious in my relationship, like things didn't feel secure, I would, well, okay, in this relationship, it was more around the time that I leaned toward restricting. So I would lose my appetite, be working out more, be eating less, feel less free around food because I was stressed out in my relationship. I felt insecure. In the past, when I was single in my 20s and going through really severe binge eating episodes, my attachment insecurity was triggered then too. I was like feeling very lonely, very disconnected from friends at that time, and like drowning myself in food to cope. And so, you'll notice that when you pay attention to these parallels and like you're working on building security, whether it's in your relationships, with your relationship with yourself, even, that will translate into your relationship with food and your body as well. Another thing I'll mention is with clients, something that just came up this week is we were talking about this feeling around food where like you feel like you have to get it correct.
Mm,
So we were talking about a specific trigger that happens when you feel like you've eaten too much or you've eaten some of the wrong thing. And it came from this feeling like, have I done this right? Like I need to be eating correctly. And that stems from childhood, like a conditional relationship that if you're not achieving and performing at the highest level, you're not going to get that support or acceptance or love or care from your caregivers. So that triggers attachment insecurity, and that's what makes food feel like such a big problem because they hadn't yet healed that part of them that says, "Wait a sec, like, I'm the adult now. I don't need to get things correct. I make up my own rules."
Mm.
So, that's why it can really help to dig into these attachment patterns and you mentioned inner child the last time we spoke, like really getting connected with that inner child who feels unsafe in those moments with food.
Wanting to get decisions with food, like, totally correct. I recently had a conversation with a client about how he felt like, the weight of the world was on his shoulders when it came to every single decision with food, whether it be breakfast or lunch or a snack or like, should I be eating this right now? Should I not be? How much should I have? What should I like? That need to get it just right all the time. What you said about childhood and parents surrounding that and where that can come from. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? Because I know there's a bunch of people listening who resonate very much with that feeling of what's the right choice here? What's the right thing to I need to do the right thing, and if I don't get this right, then consequences.
Mm. I think that level of perfectionism can develop in like a direct way where you are hearing from your parents like these are the foods you're allowed to eat and these are the foods you're not allowed to eat, or these are the foods that like overweight people eat, or it could come from direct beliefs about food and weight stigma. um and, like, when we're young, we look to our parents for acceptance, like, that is our goal during those early years of life, like, we are looking at them for approval.
Mhm.
That's what helps us build security. So if getting food right, eating enough or not too much or whatever was part of feeling that approval from your parents, then it's something that just can translate into adulthood, right? Like unconsciously or even consciously. Sometimes we don't know how to stop it. Perfectionism can also develop like indirectly. So even if it's not food that you were told to get right, it could be that there you had caregivers who were highly critical and you had to perform in a way that satisfied them to avoid conflict, and so every choice feels life or death, like like it
Yeah.
feels like it means so much because criticism is like so hard, especially if you're receiving too much of it. um so I think those are the two ways, like, directly when it comes to food, or even indirectly, perfectionism is really like a protective mechanism that helps us avoid feelings of shame that we get when we make a perceived, like, real or imaginary mistake or have perceived flaws.
And acceptance, you said. I've never heard it phrased quite so eloquently and concisely, saying that for a kid, acceptance is the goal. We could dig up the evolutionary reasons of why that's the case, but, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But really, for children, especially young children, being accepted by our family, by our inner circle, our tribe, that's the thing that we're looking for. And it's kind of, um, I think the word tragic is a little bit dramatic, but I just can't think of a different word right now. But it's a little bit tragic that the way that we're wired results in us seeking acceptance from people who, in most cases are very flawed in their own ways. So we're there as these kind of blank slates as children going, okay, these are my people. This is my world. I need to be accepted by these people. What do I need to do in order to gain that acceptance? And that puts us in a really very, very precarious position as kids.
Yeah. Like, my son is 8 months old, and even now I notice him, like, if something happens, like, he looks to me to see how I respond,
Ah, wow.
right? And so that's why, like, this, I'm gonna use the word again, healing work
Yeah.
is so important because a lot of us have goals to break this, like, intergenerational trauma. Like, we don't wanna pass down our food struggles and body struggles to our kids. And so it is really cool how, when we do this work, it can feel so rewarding because we're not only healing for ourselves, we're healing for our children and breaking that pattern. And yet, like you said, the healing journey doesn't have to be forever. And we're never gonna be, like, these 100%, like, perfect people with no problems. Like, we're always gonna have reactions, and there are times where you're gonna, like, react to your kid in a way that doesn't align with your values, and, like, you can repair those ruptures. Like, you can
Mhm.
make mistakes, and you can repair. That's part of healthy relationships too. So,
Mhm.
I don't want anyone to think that, like, they have to heal and be perfect for their kids to grow up,
100%.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? It's like that awareness, like you said, gives us the strength or like the capacity can in those moments to stop and notice, oh, I reacted in a way that, may not be so helpful. What's the next step I can do to, resolve things or create a repair, help repair, whatever rupture might have been made.
I'm glad you mentioned that and how that process of rupture and repair is actually part of healthy relationships. It's one of the ingredients that helps a relationship get stronger. It helps our felt sense of security because we know that okay, even if there is a rupture, some kind of disagreement, some kind of disconnect, we will find our way back to repair and connection. Like this isn't a disastrous end of the world type thing. For anyone of a certain age who used to watch Friends, it reminds me of the episode where Chandler and Monica have started dating and they have their first fight. And Chandler is like, well, I guess I'll take my stuff now and go home. I guess that's it. And Monica's like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, it's over, right? Like we had. She's like, no, like we had a fight. Like we're still together. It's fine. And as as tragic as Matthew Perry's story is, in Friends, he actually models a very, very interesting, avoidantly attached character. It's a really interesting character study in avoidant attachment, looking at Chandler and how he kind of manages things, and that moment especially is quite cool. And then the value of that repair translated into our relationship with food, again, is a really helpful parallel because if we are always striving to get things with food absolutely perfect, it just reinforces the idea that we do have to get everything perfect. Whereas internalizing that feeling of safety that can come with, you know what, not every decision is going to be perfect. And that is actually part of a healthy relationship with food, that deviation from the norm and then coming back to the norm rather than going way off the reservation and getting lost there, a really important experience to have with food and with body image. Disconnect and repair.
Exactly, exactly, and it's, like, really cool because when you're working on one area, like I said, like, it can translate into other areas. So if you're working on your perfectionism with, say you're in school or you're at work and you're learning to tolerate that discomfort of, like, doing something imperfectly or making a mistake, and it's okay. You learn through repetition that it's not the end of the world. You're kind of, like, showing your nervous system it's safe to be flawed, to have mistakes, and that will translate into how you feel around food and your body as well. So it's not like you have to, like, Oh, someone might be listening to this be like, "Oh, no, I have to work on my, like, attachment insecurity now too?" No, like, it's all connected. It's all connected.
Isn't that cool though, how you think, "Oh, no, there are so many different things that I need to work on and so many things that need my attention," but the more we understand about these things, the more we see the common ground and the parallels, and how if we do this thing over here, that's actually the same thing that we're doing over there. Like it becomes less cumbersome and more like a core group of key lessons and key corrective experiences that we're looking to create.
Yeah, it becomes less overwhelming,
Yeah.
less like, "Oh my god, I've got all these things to fix about myself. I thought I only had 1 or 2, and now I have 10." Like, no, it's building this awareness and learning about yourself is like, helps you make sense of things in various areas. I think maybe one other piece is with body image, like how I mean, we spoke about this before as well of how body insecurities are relational as well. And so I think it's, you know, maybe if someone is struggling with their body image, one thing they can do is think about a secure relationship in their life that they have and almost like channel that feeling of acceptance that you get from that person in times when you're feeling a lot of shame around your body. I find that like by focusing on healthy, secure relationships in our lives, it can help us work through those physical insecurities. So I guess that's just kind of one area that I felt like maybe we um, didn't touch on. We talked about the food, but sometimes when you're making great progress with food, you see your body change, and then that strikes up a whole other level of emotions and insecurities. So
Yeah.
I think that can be helpful to think about that. This work on building security or attachment security can help with body image as well.
There's something that came to mind when you were talking about your son and how he's looking to you. You know, he 8 months old, did you say? And he's
Hmm.
already looking to you when things are happening. It made me think of the conversations that I have when people say, "My childhood was great. There's nothing wrong with it. Like everything was brilliant. I'm fine. Like I don't want to go there." While simultaneously showing some signs that, yeah, what we're feeling and experiencing and believing right now comes from the echoes of our past. And obviously, I'm a coach, not a therapist. So it's not m- within my kind of repertoire to be digging around in people's past, but I do encourage people to have an awareness of how the past can affect the present. And so there's one thing I'd like to mention about this for anyone who's kind of feeling like, no, 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 like there's nothing in my past that's affecting me now. Like it's fine. It doesn't always need to be that capital T trauma that shapes our beliefs and our feelings. The implication is not that your parents were horrifically flawed or bad people or anything like that. It's just that we do take in things when we are kids that shape how we think and feel. There was a really heartbreaking experiment that was done on this, Natalie. I'm not like you might have heard of it, so tell me if this rings a bell. It was done some point in the last century, and it was to demonstrate children's reactions to mothers' attention. Mothers and children were placed in a room. The mother was interacting with the child, like eye contact, speaking, and then the instruction for the mother was to allow their face to go completely blank and to simply turn their head away. To not do anything violent or shout or anything crazy. It was simply to be interacting one moment and then to allow their face to go totally blank and remain non-reactive when their child tries to get their attention. I won't say too much more about it because the reactions in these children were heartbreaking to watch. How distressing it was for a child to be getting attention, getting engagement, and then suddenly be faced with a non-responsive parent. You could see it was deeply emotionally distressing. And as parents, lives are still complicated. There is a lot going on, and like Natalie said earlier, this doesn't mean that parents have to get it absolutely perfect, because that disconnection and repair is part of a healthy relationship. But even if you do find yourself thinking like, "Oh, no, nothing could have possibly like, I'm like, my childhood is fine." We take on these small things like a parent's attention moving away or someone being unresponsive or, things like that, and we make those things mean something in our developing minds that then becomes the foundation for further beliefs and feelings and everything like that. So be kind to yourself in terms of what you think, what you feel, and be a little bit curious about where those things came from, because it doesn't take like capital T trauma to have some things that might require a bit of kindness and compassion.
Yeah, exactly. What you're describing is called the still face experiment.
Oof.
And yes, I learned about that, when I was working to become a therapist. And it was hard to watch. There's also the study by Mary Ainsley. I might be butchering her name just because it's been so long, but directly related to attachment and kids' reactions when their parent leaves the room. So that is where they identify those different types of attachment styles. So it's really interesting to look at if someone is sort of opening their eyes to this and understanding, oh, do I feel a little bit anxious in situations or am I, kind of avoidant in other situations? It can be a starting place just to learn and to have compassion, like you said, that no parent gets it completely right. And so it's so normal for, even if something major like capital T trauma hasn't happened, for the relationship dynamics that you're exposed to growing up to have shaped the way that you see yourself in relationships, you see others, see the world. And it just, helps us have that awareness about ourselves, that understanding about ourselves. And that's what can help us build trust with ourselves. Kind of going back to your first point about, does the healing journey ever end? And is it, avoiding? And I think it's like when we can understand ourselves, it helps us build that trust to stop seeing ourselves as like a project to fix and just being able to help ourselves through life and the inevitable circumstances in life that are going to be challenging.
And just because I'm concerned there might be a few parents listening thinking, "Oh my god, I'm ruining my child. What have I done?" Like, as a parent, is there something that you might be able to leave people with here, as a parent, as and a therapist, just to help anyone who might be freaking out right now?
Yeah. So, as a parent myself, and, you know, my baby just went into daycare, which is one thing. But before that, you know, I found myself scrolling on my phone sometimes when I'm beside him or when he's eating. And it's, we don't have the capacity to give eye contact 100% of the time. So we cannot expect ourselves to be perfect parents with perfect eye contact and the perfect emotional responses. That's not what's going to help your baby. What's going to help your baby is the majority of your response. Like if your baby knows that you are there, you're coming back, like you love him, that's it. Like that's enough. So we don't want to be strive for perfection because that's going to stress us out and our baby will feel that stress. It's like giving yourself the permission to be an imperfect parent and know like there are going to be times when your baby's going to be, you know, crying and you can't get to him immediately and it's not going to ruin him,
Yeah.
right? It's just about doing your best. Um there are situations that are hard, like putting your baby in daycare, and you're gonna feel like an awful parent, and that doesn't mean that you are. It's just being intentional with the time that you have and knowing that there's no such thing as like perfect attachment.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Natalie. It was really good catching up with you again, and I always enjoy our conversations.
Thank you. Me too. And thanks for having me.
We'll be in touch.
Thanks for joining us for this chat today. Remember, like I said at the start, if you have questions or you need support, don't hesitate to reach out to either Natalie or myself by following the links in the episode description. My name's Marcus. This was Strong Not Starving. We'll see you next time.